गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। वणक्कम, प्रणाम एंड जय हिंद। आज हम बात करेंगे रिटर्न ऑफ ग्लोबल टेरर और इंडिया के ऊपर क्या असर होगा और इम्प्लीकेशंस फॉर इंडिया क्या है, उनके बारे में बात करेंगे। इन सब चीजों के बारे में बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ हैं जनरल हसनैन सर। गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट वंस अगेन।
Jai Hind, good evening. My pleasure to be with you again. But I must apologize that I think we have delayed our very, very valuable audience a little bit because I had a commitment. That's
why. I must thank you, sir, कि आपने आपके कमिटमेंट के बावजूद आप आए, and I think that is more for every one of us. So for a senior person like you, with so many commitments, to spare time for, I would say the common people of India, is something great, and
we are all the common people of India.
We are all the
putting
common
our heads
people.
Together.
I agree with
putting our heads
together. So today we'll talk of two things. आप और हम बात करते रहे हैं कि दहशतगर्दी दुनिया में बढ़ रहा है और ये वापस आने वाला है, और ये द नेक्स्ट वेव ऑफ ग्लोबल टेरर इज ऑन द वे। एक तरफ वो है विच इज द मेन फोकस आज का जो इवेंट मतलब प्रोग्राम। बट इन द पास्ट 1 week we've seen something from unusual happening in Pakistan. वो गार्डियन का एक वो आर्टिकल निकला है जहां उन्होंने they have put fingers at us that we have done extrajudicial killings in Pakistan, and they've linked it up with what's happening in Canada and USA. Plus, very surreptitiously, which many people don't know, this chap Ghulam Nabi Faiz, who's a lobbyist, Pakistani lobbyist in USA, he started putting out stories equating Kosovo with Kashmir and all that. So if you add that and what's happened in the Guardian article together, I think जो पाकिस्तान जो है वो एक बेस बना रहा है कि दोबारा दहशतगर्दी हमारे ओर शुरू करे. So this is the second part of the story, but the first is the main thing. जब तक हम उसके बारे में we don't understand, I think this one, which the new narrative which is coming out of Pakistan, also will be difficult to handle.
Absolutely.
So this is the base I'm putting it across. आप बात कीजिए, आपका opening ये comment दीजिए, then we'll go to a small presentation which I have, and then इसके बारे में discuss करेंगे.
Thank you. Good introduction. और आपका segmentation जो है बिल्कुल सही है. Let me start by saying I have written a couple of articles. हाल ही में एक आया है जो रशिया के ऊपर था, जब ये अटैक हुआ था रशिया में रिसेंट, और उससे पहले भी पिछले 2-3 साल में आई हैव बीन रेगुलरली कीप राइटिंग ऑन द इशू ऑफ ग्लोबल टेरर. मेरी थियोरी ये है, मैं ज्यादा पीछे नहीं जाऊंगा. माय थियोरी इज दैट 2018 was the last major effort when ISIS, or the Islamic State, gave us a last-ditch battle at Mosul, primarily Mosul. Was defeated there over a period of 6 to 9 months. It tried to fight, if you remember, it tried to fight absolutely conventional. It was defeated. What everyone thought was it was completely, sort of vanquished. That is not true. वो vanquish नहीं हुआ था, मगर एक network state में वो exist कर रहा था. Just like the Al-Qaeda, after being pressurized in Afghanistan, remained in a network state. और ज्यादातर ये सोशल मीडिया, ज्यादातर इंटरनेशनल नेटवर्क्स जो हैं, ये इंटरनेट के नेटवर्क्स जो हैं, इसके जरिए एक फैसिलिटेशन हो गया है टेररिस्ट वर्ल्ड में. एक तो प्रोपेगेंडा, साइकोलॉजिकल वॉरफेयर, फाइनेंशियल ट्रेनिंग, कोऑर्डिनेशन, कॉन्फ्रेंसेस, ये सब चीजें, इसकी सहूलियत जो है वो इंटरनेट के जरिए इनको मिल गई है, इंटरनेट एंड सोशल मीडिया के जरिए मिल गई है. सो आफ्टर 2018 Islamic State tried very hard as the leading terror group of the world to find a place, a physical place for itself. It tried in Philippines, it tried in southern India, it tried in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh में कोशिश की, मगर कहीं पर ये टिक नहीं पाए. और then they finally went into the area of Nangarhar in इन अफगानिस्तान, नॉर्दर्न अफगानिस्तान में जाकर वहां पर ये टिके जाकर. And they found that that's an area which was not being addressed by the Taliban, not being addressed by the Americans. So most of the terror groups of the world who were in a network state and needed some kind of a physical entity to survive with, all gravitated to that area. उससे सबसे ज्यादा खतरा जो है वो दोबारा वापस इसी रीजन में आ गया. साउथ एशिया, दैट्स पाकिस्तान, इंडिया, अफगानिस्तान, और नई एक दिशा जो है टुवर्ड्स सेंट्रल एशिया, जो आपने अभी देखा रशिया में होते हुए. रशिया के अंदर बहुत दहशतगर्दी हुई है पहले. Lots of terrorist attacks have taken place. Large terrorist attacks have taken place. Most of them were linked to the Chechen rebels at that time. Magar that problem does not exist to that extent today. And what we find this particular attack is a manifestation of the entry of some of these groups, including the Islamic State, into Central Asia. The last issue to just keep in mind here is 2018 के बाद जब ये कोशिशें हो रही थी, 2020 में you suddenly found the pandemic. अब पैंडेमिक का असर जो है बहुत जबरदस्त असर हुआ है टेरर के ऊपर. Movement, freedom of movement was curbed hugely in this case, and they suffered large-scale casualties themselves. And you found it ebbing. Global terror ebb होने लगा. मगर जब 2021 में अगस्त में जब अमेरिकन ने विड्रॉ किया अफगानिस्तान से, वो स्पेस वापस आ गई और उसके अंदर कोशिश होने लगी, कॉन्टेस्टेशन होने लगा, पाकिस्तान के अंदर कॉन्टेस्टेशन होने लगा. ये सब चीजें इसी एरिया के अंदर चलती रही. हालांकि किसी की तवज्जो, किसी की फोकस जो थी वो अफ्रीका, वेस्टर्न अफ्रीका और ईस्टर्न अफ्रीका पर नहीं थी. और मैं समझता हूं आप इसके ऊपर थोड़ा दिखाएंगे अपने स्लाइड्स में भी कि कितनी ज्यादा इसके ऊपर फोकस दुनिया की हुई है. बट द लॉन्ग एंड शॉर्ट ऑफ दिस इंट्रोडक्शन इज that by 2021 an effort to come back was being made. यूक्रेन, जो यूक्रेन में हुआ है और जो गाजा में खास तौर पे हुआ है और जो हो रहा है ये हुतीज के साथ, all this is giving an impetus to bring back the radical ideology linked with global terror.
Right, sir. तो जैसे आपने बोला, I just put together a few slides जिससे आपको एक ओवरव्यू मिलेगा कि जनरल हसनैन क्या बात कर रहे हैं. व्हाट इज इट टॉकिंग ऑफ, राइट? पीपल थिंक ओह देयर इज नो टेरर, इट्स ऑल disparate things going on. It's not so. There's a pattern, and here is the pattern. These are the 10 countries which are impacted by terrorism. It starts with Burkina Faso, Israel, Mali, Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, नाइजीरिया, म्यांमार एंड नाइजर. सो जो जनरल हसनैन बोल रहे थे, एंड आप मैप में भी देख सकते हो, द सेंट्रल रीजन ऑफ अफ्रीका, अफ्रीका में ज्यादा है. हमारे दोनों विंग्स में टू द ईस्ट एंड वेस्ट, म्यांमार और पाकिस्तान में ज्यादा हो रहा है, अफगानिस्तान में ज्यादा हो रहा है. तो आप ये सब देखेंगे तो देयर इज अ मार्क्ड इंक्रीज. दीज आर द 10 टॉप कंट्रीज, और भी हैं पर मेजर. अच्छा, और अगर हम देखेंगे तो कुछ हाल ही में, आप पिछले 6-7 महीने में कहाँ मेजर अटैक्स हुए हैं? पाकिस्तान, मॉस्को, ईरान, जहां वो मेजर जनरल सोलेमानी का वो एनिवर्सरी के ऊपर अटैक हुआ था, सीरिया, इजराइल, हमास, नाइजीरिया, मलेशिया का जो है अभी शुरुआत हो रहा है. हाल ही में मैंने 4 दिन पहले देखा था सर कि वहां एक मॉल के अंदर फायरिंग हो गया और कुछ फटाके जल गए. क्यों? किसी ने कुछ अगेंस्ट इस्लामिक रिलीजियस सिंबल्स कुछ काम किया या सुनने में आया, ऐसे हुआ, तो देयर वाज अ रिएक्शन. सो दिस होल थिंग इज रीस्टार्टिंग. मलेशिया इसीलिए मैंने बताया क्योंकि आपको याद है तो बाली बॉम्बिंग्स हुए थे एक जमाने में. इंडोनेशिया बगल में ही है. दैट एंटायर एरिया इज आल्सो इस्लामिक बेल्ट व्हिच हैज सफर्ड ड्यू टू टेररिज्म, बट दैट टेररिज्म इज डिफरेंट. बट आइडियोलॉजी जो है वो फैलता है. ओके, ये इसमें अगर हम देखेंगे तो 2-4 चीजें हैं जो इंटरेस्टिंग चीजें हैं. वो ये है कि deaths from terrorism are now at their highest level since 2017. जो आपने 2018 की बात कही, ये global terrorism index is from 2017, but lower by 25% than the peak in 2015. What does it tell? It tells that terrorism is on the up. Largest falls in terrorism since 2007 is in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Okay. The interesting thing is Pakistan में बढ़ गया, Afghanistan में कम हो गया. So the epicenter of terror is shifting to Pakistan, which is important for us. I'm sure you'll speak about it also. The epicenter of terrorism has shifted from Middle East and North Africa into Sub-Saharan Africa, concentrated largely in the Sahel region. This region now accounts for almost half of the deaths from terrorism globally. But ये global view है. But हमारे जहाँ है, पाकिस्तान में बढ़ रहा है. Terrorism has become more concentrated over the past decade. यानी कि terrorist activities are concentrated. पहले कहाँ हर जगह होता था, but अभी बड़े व्याख्याएं हो रही हैं. South Asia has the highest regional average impact from terrorism. Although it improved for the past 1 year, but South Asia में कौन-कौन से? Afghanistan, Pakistan और Myanmar. Right. Total deaths from terrorism are now considerably higher in Sub-Saharan Africa than any other region. वहीं conflicts भी सबसे ज्यादा हो रहे हैं. The 4 terrorist groups responsible for the most deaths in 2023 were Islamic State, Hamas, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, and Al-Shabaab. The countries with the highest number of attacks are not attributed to a group, where Myanmar, Burkina Faso, Mali and Pakistan. तो आप देखेंगे हमारे दाहिने और बाएं यानी ईस्ट एंड वेस्ट म्यांमार में और पाकिस्तान में ओवरऑल टेररिज्म हैज इंक्रीज्ड. Burkina Faso, Mali are in Africa, so we will leave it them out at this point of time. IS in Syria is the most active it has been in 10 years, with attacks rising by 4% to 224 in 2023. Syria is a hotspot. Conflict remains the primary driver of terrorist activity. Over 90% of terror attacks in 2023 occurred in conflict zones. ये एक बहुत बड़ा important point है. Conflict and terror have got amalgamated, giving rise to a new hybrid form of conflict. जो आप हर वक्त बात करते रहते. क्या हम prepared हैं? एक तो hybrid terror को रोकने के लिए. क्या are we ready to go into a hybrid form of warfare? Not net terrorism, but hybrid form of warfare is something which we can discuss. Okay. आगे हम देखेंगे तो लार्जेस्ट डिक्रीजेस इन टेरर कहाँ है? अफगानिस्तान, सोमालिया, माली, इराक, म्यांमार, मोजाम्बिक वगैरह 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 वगैरह. हाईएस्ट इंक्रीजेस कहाँ है? आप देखिए इजराइल, बुर्किना फासो, नाइजर, पाकिस्तान, नाइजीरिया, सीरिया, बाकी कैमरून, कोलंबिया और युगांडा वगैरह वगैरह है. बट वही बात है, हमारे इर्द गिर्द काफी इंक्रीज है. ओके. And one slide I'm missing somewhere. हाँ, ये मैंने आपको दिखा दिया. Sir, you could take off from here and you could explain what's the whole story.
Okay. जन शंकर ने आपको काफी डिटेल में भी समझाया है with some parameters, statistics, etc. the areas. मैं आपको कुछ surmises देता हूँ as the way I look at it. For example, if you look at Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, if you look at East Africa in particular, they're relatively underdeveloped areas. और यहाँ जो आपको terrorist activity मिली है, Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram, etc., these organizations have essentially been surrogates. ये ISIS के surrogates हैं. एक जमाने में निकले, ये सब निकले हैं मदर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अल कायदा से, ठीक है, मगर लेटर ऑन दे बिकेम द एक्चुअल सरोगेट्स ऑफ द इस्लामिक स्टेट. they owe allegiance, they have owed allegiance to it to a great extent. Of course, they are not absolutely a part of it, but as I said, they are surrogates. And they continue to hold the fort in Africa. It is like saying कि अभी हालत जो है इतनी ज्यादा नहीं बिगड़ी है, but they attempt to try and bring about a radical political Islam in some of these areas in Africa. Those efforts are continuing. And no one is looking at this year, next year, or 5 years. It is a long-term effort. The Americans call it the long war. It can go on for the next 200 years, this kind of a war, right? So when you're looking at ideological changes taking place and because of which terror attacks are taking place, be sure that this is some long-term activity. You will put an end to it for some time, tactically, operationally, but strategically, it will still continue to lie low and come back at some stage. That's exactly what is happening in Africa at the moment, right? That's exactly what happened in Afghanistan, if you see. And in Afghanistan, you saw that as soon as the presence of the Americans was removed from there, efforts came in with different groups, all attempting to try and get that limited space which has been there, expanding themselves into other areas like Central Asia. Central Asia, you should be aware, has a presence of 72 million Muslims. Not very developed. It's an area where political Islam has not made inroads. Because if you remember, the Soviet Union is the one which was the dominant force here right through the Cold War. So any kind of a radical ideology did not enter at that time at all. Subsequently, huge efforts have been made to try and make inroads into Central Asia. They have not entirely succeeded, but now the first sign seems to be coming about. There are other movements also here which are linked to this. The East Turkestan movement, as it's called. That's again a very, very important one. There are groups which are linked to the Uyghurs, which are there in Xinjiang. China is not free of terror, let me tell you. China has got a huge scope. The western part of China, there is huge scope of turmoil, turbulence in this complete area if it gets effectively networked with the international terror organizations. So these are some of the activities which have been happening in this area. The area which is relatively quiet for the last couple of years is Europe. You will see we saw a mass upsurge, a mass, not infiltration, but movement of immigrants into Europe, which took place in 2016, 17, 18, 19, is still taking place even now. Large number of them have settled in different cities. Approximately 4 to 5 million people got evicted from Syria and moved into Turkey and Greece and thereon onto Germany, etc. It upset the overall socio-political balance in Europe. And you found that a new generation of immigrants trying to settle in there at odds with the interests of those who were already here. Europe, the problem in Europe is that it's a dwindling population. It's an aging population. They need labor forces. If labor forces have to be brought in, and these forces themselves are coming in from Africa or from the Middle East, at some stage, they are likely to become very prone to this kind of a radical ideology. And this is what led to, if you remember, the ISIS links from West Asia onto Belgium, onto Paris, into France, Spain, the UK, everywhere. Now, all this has quietened down at the moment. There is no, if you see the excellent slides which Shankar has put out, there is no activity of this kind taking place in Europe at the moment. It is all around here. Malaysia, let me just particularly add this thing. There was a stage, and you mentioned by Shankar, the Bali bombings, Indonesia, Philippines, Southern Thailand, Malaysia. This was a region about 20 years ago, which was in reasonable turmoil, a state of turmoil, right? That has quietened down to a very great extent. A lot of people say it's the distance, well away from the Middle East, well away from the core centers of Islamic, the shrines, etc. And that's the reason why perhaps so much attention is not paid to the Southeast Asian Islamic nations. But nevertheless, this is an area which is always prone to it. There is a fair amount of radical ideology which persists in this area. Economically, they are good, well-off countries in which you may find people coming into the influence of this kind of an activity and spreading the wings out from here. Many people from Southeast Asia have been found to be members of the various terror groups, particularly the Islamic State. Lastly, the Islamic State, of course, subscribes to people from all over the world. Among the leading groups which are a part of it are the Chechens, particularly from Central Asia, southern Russia. Indians, we had reports of about 130 Indians who went and became a part of the Islamic State. It is not confirmed as to what kind of activities were they really involved with. Mostly it is known that they were involved with logistics activities and not really employed as fighters of the Islamic State, except a few of them from Kerala who had gone to Afghanistan, right? So India's role to that extent is something which is quite admirable, in the sense that despite the 200 million Muslim population in India, we have found a very, very small footprint of Islamic State's influence in India as such. As against this, you see Maldives. 200 went as active fighters with the Islamic State, considering that the population of Maldives is sub 1 million, right? So this is quite an achievement for India. One aspect which you must remember is, from an intellectual angle, one of the first controllers of the Islamic State, recruitment particularly, was a person called Shami Witness, who was, if you remember, who spent 8 months in Bangalore carrying out coordination activity for the Islamic State worldwide. And he was finally arrested way back in 2015. He was finally arrested. So India has had a role, and there is always the possibility of things happening in India. We cannot rule out that. And that is why we need to discuss this. We need to be careful about it. See what are the parameters, what are the indicators, how do we go about creating a concept by which we can ensure that we remain safe from the threats which are now slowly once again re-emerging, at least in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, the Middle East, and which are already been persistent throughout in the African states.
So, आपने अच्छे तरीके से बता दिया कि किस तरीके से ये it's reviving itself, and the central organization which is underpinning this growth is the IS. इसमें दो राय नहीं है. अगर आप देखेंगे तो मॉस्को के अटैक में भी IS शामिल था, ईरान में भी IS का हाथ था इन दैट करमान में जो अटैक हुआ, और जहां तक पाकिस्तान में है वहां भी यही लग रहा है कि पाकिस्तान में भी IS का हाथ था, जहां इन्होंने चाइना के अगेंस्ट एक्शन लिया. और खबर ये भी आ रहा है कि IS is also supporting ETIM to make an entry back into Xinjiang. So all this, given all this, now Pakistan is under it. The way I look at it, okay, let me rephrase the whole thing. Yeah, IS is on the resurgence. India has two problems. I mean, I would say twofold problem. One is in the near term. The near-term issue is how to tide over the elections, right? Especially the Kashmir elections, with the Supreme Court has said till September we have to finish. The second is the long-term problem. Beyond that, how do you handle it? In the short term, what we saw is Pakistan trying to regroup its own resources, make way. This narrative from the Guardian, what it has said about India, what that FI chap has come out with it, and then now they're starting to do something, and now summer is coming, passes will open, routes will open into J&K. No, so how do you think Pakistan is up to something? After all, you written an article also on this. We also know हमारे defense minister ने क्या बोला है, all that. So I would like you to talk a little about this, and then the long terms.
Thank you. These are very pertinent questions, all of them. Ghulam Fai, of course, is a known, notorious character. He's been in the payroll of the ISI for very long, been a very effective player. We also got to remember that Pakistan has been adept at the communication strategy, information warfare, and has developed it over a period of time. Perhaps learned a great deal from the Chinese, who researched the whole concept of information warfare after 1990, particularly the first Gulf War. So with all this, it is quite clear that Pakistan cannot afford to lose its relevance in Kashmir, the perception of its relevance. 35 years it has invested. Of course, a long time before that it has invested much more, but 35 years it has actively invested in this proxy war. Now, that's an important thing, proxy war, right? Proxy war does not necessarily mean only kinetic. Proxy war is of all kinds. And there are grades of proxy war. Pakistan's overall proxy war capability has been diluted to a great extent by the Indian state, the Indian army, the Indian organizations which have come together, the Intelligence Bureau, the NIC, and all of them which have come together. And the NIA, sorry, and all of them which have come together. Pakistan, because of its low capability at the moment, is trying to maintain its relevance through various actions. You saw a couple of months ago the attempts to revive things in Poonch, Rajouri, the area of Bafleas, etc. It had us all worried. It's died down. It's only died down. We have not had any shot kills or anything in this area. It is bound to come back again at some stage in the summer. At the same time, this communication strategy is being revamped. And the moment you see people like Ghulam Fai emerging, you know the ISI is now active, extremely active on its, and the ISPR in particular, the Interstate Public Relations Organization, is particularly active now. This particular article is a very interesting article comparing Kashmir to Kosovo and trying to declare very clearly that the Indian foreign minister, if you're Indian external affairs minister, if he thinks that if he just states that no one can, sort of take away Kashmir and Kashmir is an integral part of India, etc., he's got to think again, because the world recognizes that Kashmir is a persistent problem. It is a problem between India and Pakistan. I only draw attention of many people to one or two facts. And that is, 1972, India is the one who agreed to sign this, who drafted out the Shimla agreement, got the Pakistanis to sign it, decided that we will resolve this problem. I know everyone talks about it being a disputed state. It is India which virtually accepted it was a disputed state, and we could resolve it amicably if we sat together. But in 1989, Pakistan chose to use proxy war as a means. And as a result of that, I think everything actually got watered down. If a state decides to use proxy war against another state, then the other state has got the freedom to use all other means against another state, the proxy war state, the one which is sponsoring the proxy war state. And that's exactly what we have done. We've diluted the capability of Pakistan over a period of time. And you've seen Pakistan today suffering economically, socially, politically, internal turbulence, virtually the economy, the state down on its feet, on its knees at the moment. So Pakistan is in major problems. What it is attempting to do is that over the next few years, while it tries to revive itself, it is hoping that it can revive itself, it wants to maintain that relevance in Kashmir. And because of, they'll have to keep grading, they'll have to keep planning, they'll have to keep strategizing to understand what are the kind of actions that they will need to undertake. For example, if these elections, the Lok Sabha elections now, go through peacefully in Kashmir, as they expected to, it will be a big victory for India. If September, as the Supreme Court has laid down, if India conducts the assembly elections peacefully with a reasonable turnout, etc., it will sound a death knell for Pakistan, virtually. Therefore, you can expect that Pakistan will attempt to do something. It is already now triggering small actions. We are in April, and you'll find by May, June, July sometime, things will start happening. Once again, those same issues like migrant killings of TA soldiers, traffic policemen, small acts to keep the relevance going somehow or the other. Then international media, like this article by The Guardian, or other articles which are of the type which Ghulam Fai has written, will keep emerging in the international media And the international media you are seeing is not very friendly towards India. With all this which is happening in India at the moment, the manner in which articles are emerging everywhere, seems to having his focus on India and always wanting to certify as if things in India are not correct. Now, that is an ideal situation for Pakistan. Joining up with international media, carrying out its social media activities, communication strategy activities, and small acts of proxy kinetic actions here and there, they will attempt to try and keep their relevance going. This is despite the fact that they are under intense pressure internally. From the West, particularly from the Taliban, they are under intense pressure from the Baloch Liberation Army. What's happening in Balochistan? Their own ally, the Chinese, are being hit almost every other day by the BLA. So there's a lot of internal turbulence going on. It will take much for Pakistan to actually get away from all that and put its attention back to Kashmir. And that's why you'll find that there will be only sporadic acts. And these may not really work to an entire strategy. I don't think Pakistan has that capability to be able to really strategize towards something in terms of long term. What you're going to see at this time is primarily actions to keep Pakistan relevant to the issue at the moment.
Yeah. So short term, Pakistan will try to regain its relevance. वापस वो बोलेगा सबको कश्मीर में या इंडिया में कि भाई हम हैं, you don't have a free run, and they'll try their best to interfere with the elections, both Lok Sabha and this thing, and later assembly elections. The challenge before India is to see how to ward it off, how to ward this challenge off. I also feel, sir, that Pakistan has to do something this side for internal purposes, so that it can, divert the attention from the western border to the eastern border. Because ISK is active that side, and they have to do something. And we will get though Pakistan doesn't have the resources at this point of time, Pakistan army does not have the capability to move this side and restart the whole thing. But it doesn't take too much. And narratives like what they've come out in the Guardian and all that makes their case for them to start something. So that is something I think which we need to take care of, which you rightly said. That's fine. I'll leave it at that. The long term, what do we do after this? Because the long term is a combination of a revived Pakistan, if it revives, and ISK, which is expanding its activities, and the chances are that these activities, if they revive and go expand, then Afghanistan becomes destabilized once again. So in that kind of a context, what should we do is the question at hand.
You see, we have not mentioned the ISKP so far, really. And when we talk about an Islamic State in conjunction with Afghanistan, Pakistan, or South Asia as such, it is the branch of the Islamic State, which is the Islamic State for Khorasan province, ISKP, yeah, which is the one which is essentially responsible, and they're the ones who are probably responsible for what happened in Moscow. One thing I would always like to sound our viewers. Remember, in the world of terror, a big act is a very important thing. Something which Shankar just said, a big act. A big act is a very important thing. A big act messages capability. It messages arrival. Now, if you notice, you go back to the 90s and the early part of the millennium, every time the Lashkar-e-Toiba effectively, sort of put its flag into some part of Kashmir, it would carry out a major atrocity. Chittu Singhpura, for example, was the message which the elite wanted to send, the Lashkar wanted to send, that they are now embedded in South Kashmir properly, right? Vandhama, similarly, it was something like that. So this is an internationally, known norm, which is always there. The fact that the ISKP has gone to Moscow and done it has taken it well beyond the regional character that it had, the regional identity it had. The world is now looking at it becoming once again an international thing again, right? So to that extent, there is no doubt that there will be efforts to try and do something big. Pulwama was big, right? Uri was small, became big. It became big by accident, right? But there's no doubt about it. What terrorist groups always look for is something which is really big. This is something that we have to remain fearful of, number one. Why it may not happen in our case is the fact that both the times it happened the last time, right? Uri and in the case of Pulwama, the Indian government was proactive, decisive, went in a very early time frame. Within 10 days, they responded and responded in kind, proper, kinetic means, right? This is something which the Pakistan state today cannot risk. It cannot risk. And it, therefore, to the degree of controls it has got over these terrorist groups, it will ensure that a big act does not get conducted, does not get executed. They will try and keep it within what is called India's limits of tolerance. And that is why I still feel where we need to be careful in Jammu and Kashmir is not internal, not the hinterland area. The hinterland area is very difficult conducting a major operation today. It is the peripheral areas along the line of control. If you remember, Shankar would remember the attack on the gun position in the Uri Valley, which was a very, very serious Fedayeen attack which took place, right? In a place called Mohra, near Mohra.
In fact, I went there immediately after that attack.
Exactly,
I went there.
Exactly. Mohra was a typical act, right? Uri, Tangdhar, Punch, all three major headquarters, brigade headquarters, the areas got attacked by some elements, some suicide elements or the other. All of them are on the periphery. It's easy to infiltrate in one night, carry out an action and try and evict yourself and get back. Right? Similarly, Samba, Vijaypur, take these areas from Katwa to Jammu. These are the areas, again, you got very, very vulnerable. So to my mind, these are the kind of areas we need to keep our attention on them. Not to say that we don't need to keep our attention on the hinterland. Of course, that is very important and we need to protect it at all times. But these areas are the ones which are particularly vulnerable at this time. And sometimes it happens that, you get a strike on this. It may not lead to too many casualties. And the perception on the other side may be that it's just within your limits of tolerance, so to say. Although limits of tolerance in case of India have never been defined. We have never laid down into that 4 soldiers will die or 10 soldiers will die. No, India can retaliate on anything. India can retaliate on anything, and that demonstration, that capability has been demonstrated adequately, right? So this is in the near term that we are looking at all this happening. Now, long term, let's just link the global side of it to the regional, to what's happening within India. With what is happening in Gaza at the moment, the messaging in the Islamic world is very, very intense, very, very intense. I'm sure if you travel in the Middle East and the best place in the Middle East I found where you get to know what exactly is the thinking in the minds of the people is smoking rooms at airports. Go to a smoking room, take a cigarette, light up, throw a small subject here and there, and look for how you have to know how to do it and look for a response. And from there, you'll be able to gauge what the emotions are in that area. I can tell you today, the emotions are rising a lot because of the atrocities in Gaza in particular, right? So this is something, this tide will once again rise from here. What is happening by the Houthis is a completely different and unconnected thing, right? It's not such an important thing. But this Iran-Syria-Israel issue has all the potential of going far beyond, right? Then in that case, what happens? It does not become a Sunni or a Shia show or something like that. Then it gets the Islamic world combined together, and then awkward things start happening from there. That is one aspect as far as the international part is concerned. Regionally here, long term, you can think Afghanistan in particular, I think India, we must look at our relationship with the Taliban, whether it's tactical reasons or otherwise. But I think it's in our interest to make sure that our relationship with the Taliban is intact and taken beyond. We should come to the assistance of Afghanistan under any circumstances, maybe to the extent of a certain amount of economic assistance or whatever. No recognition needs to be given. No one has recognized the Taliban, I think, in the world till now. So we don't have to do that either. But there are all kinds of diplomatic means by which you show your support. And that's exactly what India should continue to do. Because holding Pakistan in the West in this manner will ensure that Pakistan's capability to pay attention to the East is that much limited. And we need our time in Kashmir to continue our build-up of our activity. We don't want a situation in Kashmir where, with all the good work which is going on there, a dilution starts taking place with sporadic terrorist activity coming back again. No, that's not going to be to our interest at all. And therefore, we need time. And if anyone still thinks that you can reduce the strength of the army from here, I think you got to be thinking again. Because that is a very important aspect. This victory has been won, not victory so far. I mean, we have created a positive environment because of the joint effort which has been done by the security forces. Now trying to leave it only to police forces to manage, etc., may just create that void which Pakistan is looking for. And this is something which we should not accept.
In fact, day before yesterday, so self and general dua, we discussed ASPA and all that. And what we said was that, look, the army shouldn't be withdrawn. It can be kept there. It can be doing its normal activities, improvement, maintain your int setup. You might not be doing active operations. Be in the background. Leave the folk, let the J&K police handle everything. But moving out army from there, thinning out army is just no go. At least till the elections are over and the new government stabilizes, and then we can take a relook. In any case, sir, the Home Minister has said this is a thing which we're going to take over a longer period, so it's not a big deal.
These are issues which are spoken of for an election or whatever it is. No one has to take any confirmation from an indicator which has been given by any political leader at this time.
Yeah. The issue which I thought is relevant is what the defense minister said, that look, you try something, we'll come after you. I thought that was also a good message which went across to Pakistan.
It was a very good message which went across, but it got misread very badly, and it got exploited by the Pakistani side on the other side, which we have countered now adequately. Lots of people like me and you have written about it, spoken about it. For our viewers, let me just indicate, the moment it was said that hum ghuskar maar sakte hain, humne ghuskar mara hai, Pakistan took it literally. Sometimes you take a statement and convert it literally to your own convenience and say, देखो, भारत ने अंदर घुसकर और in extraterritorial killings की हैं. What the Raksha Mantri clearly stated was that these were responses which had happened in the past. With when the surgical strikes were there, we demonstrated, we went a short distance across the line of control and carried out surgical actions against terrorists and did not touch the Pakistan army. And when it happened in Pulwama, we went deep into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, carried out this thing against Jabba Top and against Balakot, carried out the action, and we demonstrated that we can reach to that extent also. तो ये demonstration थे कि हमने अंदर आकर और आपको मारा है वहां पर, and this got converted into as if this is some kind of surrogate killings which the India
but that's okay, sir. But the message has gone home. The message has gone home, and I thought also, sir, that he had a more important message when he put out. जब उन्होंने बोला कि भाई देखो POK में जो political गतिविधियां हो रही हैं, the time is probably now coming where they will come and say, please take us into India. That thing was also a great message which he put across for the long term.
Absolutely. जैसे कि बलूच का वो हो रहा है, and the Baluch issue, the way it is multiplying, is causing a tremendous amount of turbulence inside Pakistan political space as such. And you can imagine now that यही चीज अगर पीओके में और गिलगित बाल्टिस्तान में और भी ज्यादा स्कोप है. In both places, if it happens, can you imagine the state of Pakistan completely?
Yeah, so I think we've generally covered, sir, all things, all bases we've touched today. We've spoken of overall global terror. The issue which comes out is that global terror is on the rise, and we have to be clear about it. And we have to devise new strategies because the way this whole story is now panning out is slightly different. And we have to tackle it at two levels, the near term and the long term. And we've worked about all that. We'll take a few questions if you don't mind, sir.
Yes.
Unless you have anything else more to say.
No, nothing. Maybe I can just add one little thing here. It's important to keep, you see, we may be having a perception in India that we have not succeeded. Our government has not succeeded in convincing the Western world. And we find too much of negativity coming out from the Western world against India, while the same negativity doesn't reflect as far as this relationship in context to Pakistan is concerned. Now, this is something of concern for us. And I think our efforts should not dilute. Pakistan, the West plays to its interests. And there are times when its interests are completely linked to India. There are times when its interests are completely linked to Pakistan. So I don't think we should get carried away by that kind of a thing. Our efforts should continue to implant that perception in the minds of the Western world and the Western media that Pakistan is a sponsor of state proxy war, the sponsor of state terrorism, and that it is the core center from where this revival of international terrorism, global terrorism, is again taking place. We must remind the world once again of the words which Hillary Clinton has once said about snakes in the backyard and things like that. Those must not be forgotten under these conditions.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, sir. I think that's a very timely thing. We'll